I have been always kind of fascinated with nomenclature and classification systems, and I thought it was extremely fitting that in a class on biology and anthropology, which is very concerned with evolution, that the actual terms used to describe what's going on are, in fact, in a process of evolution. When I went to high school in 1970, Mr. Posnick told us we had a kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species, and the mnemonic was King Philip came over from Germany South. Um, in 1976, I took a night class at Rollins with Dr. Shear, and he basically, confirmed that um, was the order of things. At the time, there was the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom, and then there was some other stuff going on with germs, but um, I didn't get into a situation where I dove very much into that. So when um, when I looked up, the phylogenetic taxonomy recently, it had grown a little bit. We had life, and then in life there are domains, kingdoms, and then the rest of them: phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Um, there was several different interpretations on how many kingdoms. Uh, I found a couple of different ones. There was somebody named Cavalier Smith in 2015 said there were two empires, which would be the eukaryotes and the prokaryotes, and six or seven different kingdoms. Um, there was somebody named Woese back in 1990s just said there were three domains, and that's all you had to worry about. And then Whitaker in 1969 talked about five kingdoms. Um, so it's constantly growing and changing and being disputed, and um, I uh, I really like when things can be organized. So I actually copied this out of Wikipedia with the primates, um, and how it branches off. And it's just so nice and organized and neat. So you got the whatever came before the primates, and then the primates and then you got the Dermoptera, which I guess is a pretty primitive critter that branched off, and then you had the good old strepsirrhines and the haplorhines, and the wet noses and the dry noses, and the tarsiers, and then the New World and the Old World monkeys, and the gibbons, and then the great apes. Um, and the older classification, which was useful up until they came up with a newer one, was the prosimians, the monkeys, the lesser apes, and the great apes, um, which has kind of been superseded by that, but the terms are still used sometimes. And I just love having that at my fingertips, and that kind of knowledge. It just helps to create a framework to remember things in and how they relate to each other. So I wondered how it got that way, and there was a word that cropped up a few times in the semester, clade. I was kind of fascinated by that. I have heard it before, in literary studies, maybe referring to a bunch of authors from a particular time, but used scientifically, um, it's based on common ancestry, and it's an approach to biological classification, based on the hypothesis of the most recent common ancestry. Um, and that is how they came on um, that nice, neat classification by applying the principles of cladistics. Um, and the the concept is kind of like a family tree, and this is from I copied this out of our text, where the last universal common ancestor, and then all the things branching off from it, and different landmarks and important events along the way. and so it breaks down, it's, that's the principle. And of course, that's everything, so really, cladistics taken to the extreme would be we all come from the last universal common ancestor. But of course, useful classifications, you don't have to go quite so far. Um, and that's how they arrived at the, well, primate, which is a class, and then, it's a class in the uh, phylum of mammals, and it goes on. I may not have gotten all that right, but that wasn't my subject anyway. Um, so the cladistics, they want to find, the parentage, or the ancestry, and so what they, and rather than looking at everything, they try to look at specific traits. They call them character states that provide evolutionary information. Um, so the in class we covered, primitive or ancestral traits and specialized or derived traits. So with an ancestral trait, you can't really go by that because the ancestor also had it. So it isn't, you're not something new if you're just carrying on the same genes. Um, and so in cladistics, they're a little bit more um, rapturous about multisyllabic words. So they have plesiomorphy, and that's the primitive trait, and the apomorphy, which is a specialized or derived trait. And then they have a bunch of varieties, different morphes. But the one that's important is the synapomorphy, and that's a derived trait shared by two or more groups. So you can trace that back up, and uh, quoting directly from the resource, organisms that are united by one or more synapomorphies share a common ancestor which possess these derived traits. Um, and what they're trying to get to is what's called a monophyletic group. So it includes all descendants of the common ancestor. And that's what we have with the primates. There was a primal primate, and that was everything descended from that. And in the order shown, at least they hypothesize that. They can't prove it. But there's always, somebody that knows a lot more. And I had found somebody in Reddit who just, kind of tore into it. And they said, well, yeah, cladistics really only works with eukaryotes, and we now use Bayesian methods and so forth. Um, and that is a caveat. So there's a lot more to it, and it is fascinating. I hope to eventually pursue this further, but at this point, that's all I know about cladistics and how it applies to the primates. Thank you.